Hello there, how are you? I hope everyone is very well. We have 2 more days of reading The Awakening ahead of us. I can't wait to see what happens. After that, on Wednesday, as I told you yesterday, I'll be starting one of the very early Jeeves and Wooster books by P.G. Wodehouse. It's called The Inimitable Jeeves. It's a series of short stories, and my memory of the book is that it's very funny. Made me laugh out loud when I read it, and I hope you enjoy it. It will be quite interesting to see how I do with laughing out loud whilst reading. I'm looking forward to that very much, but I'm also looking forward to The Awakening, the end of The Awakening. Where we were is that Robert Lebrun, the young man who Edna Pontellier fell in love with in the early chapters, he went off to Mexico because it seemed like he'd fallen in love with her too, and she was married. And he returns. He returns in the last few chapters that we read. She is clearly in love with him. It seems like he's in love with her. Then there's this other chap, Alcé Arobin, who has sort of slipped in the meantime, but she doesn't seem to love him. And she's moved away from her husband. So that brings us to a fireside reading of The Awakening, chapter 35. The morning was full of sunlight and hope. Edna could see before her no denial, only the promise of excessive joy. She lay in bed awake, with bright eyes full of speculation. He loves you, poor fool. If she could but get that conviction firmly fixed in her mind, what mattered about the rest? She felt she had been childish and unwise the night before in giving herself over to despondency. She recapitulated the motives which no doubt explained Robert's reserve. They were not insurmountable. They would not hold if he really loved her. They could not hold against her own passion, which he must come to realize in time. She pictured him going to his business that morning. She even saw how he was dressed, how he walked down one street and turned the corner of another, saw him bending over his desk, talking to people who entered the office, going to his lunch, and perhaps watching for her on the street. He would come to her in the afternoon or evening, sit and roll his cigarette, talk a little, and go away, as he had done the night before. But how delicious it would be to have him there with her. She would have no regrets, nor seek to penetrate his reserve, if he still chose to wear it. Edna ate her breakfast, only half dressed. The maid brought her a delicious printed scrawl from Raoul, expressing his love, asking her to send him some bonbons, and telling her they had found that morning 10 tiny white pigs, all lying in a row beside Lydie's big white pig. A letter also came from her husband, saying he hoped to be back early in March, and then they would get ready for that journey abroad, which he had promised her for so long, which he felt now fully able to afford. He felt able to travel, as people should, without any thought of small economies, thanks to his recent speculations in Wall Street. Much to her surprise, she received a note from Arobin, written at midnight from the club. It was to say good morning to her, to hope she had slept well, to assure her of his devotion, which he trusted she in some faintest manner returned. All these letters were pleasing to her. She answered the children in a cheerful frame of mind, promising them bonbons and congratulating them upon their happy find of the little pigs. She answered her husband with friendly evasiveness, not with any fixed design to mislead him, only because all sense of reality had gone out of her life. She had abandoned herself to fate and awaited the consequences with indifference. To Arobin's note, she made no reply. She put it under Celestine's stove lid. Edna worked several hours with much spirit. She saw no one but a picture dealer, who asked her if it were true that she was going to study in Paris. She said possibly she might, and he negotiated with her for some Parisian studies to reach him in time for the holiday trade in December. Robert did not come that day. She was keenly disappointed. He did not come the following day, nor the next. Each morning she awoke with hope, and each night she was a prey to despondency. She was tempted to seek him out, but far from yielding to the impulse, she avoided any occasion which might throw her in his way. She did not go to Mademoiselle Reese's, nor pass by Madame Lebrun's, as she might have done if he had still been in Mexico. When Arobin one night urged her to drive with him, she went out to the lake on the Shell Road. His horses were full of mettle and even a little unmanageable. She liked the rapid gait at which they spun along and the quick, sharp sound of the horses' hooves on the hard road. She did not stop anywhere to eat or to drink. Arobin was not needlessly imprudent, but they ate and they drank when they regained Edna's little dining room, which was comparatively early in the evening. It was late when he left her. It was getting to be more than a passing whim with Arobin to see her and be with her. He had detected the latent sensuality which unfolded under his delicate sense of her nature's requirements, like a torrid, sensitive blossom. There was no despondency when she fell asleep that night, nor was there hope when she awoke in the morning. Chapter 36. There was a garden out in the suburbs, a small leafy corner with a few green tables under the orange trees. An old cat slept all day on the stone step in the sun, and an old mulâtresse slept her idle hours away in her chair at the open window till someone happened to knock on one of the green tables. She had milk and cream cheese to sell and bread and butter. There was no one who could make such excellent coffee or fry a chicken so golden brown as she. The place was too modest to attract the attention of people of fashion, and so quiet as to have escaped the notice of those in search of pleasure and dissipation. Edna had discovered it accidentally one day when the high-board gate stood ajar. She caught sight of a little green table, blotched with the checkered sunlight that filtered through the quivering leaves overhead. Within she had found the slumbering mulâtresse, the drowsy cat, and a glass of milk, which reminded her of the milk she had tasted in Iberville. She often stopped there during her perambulations, sometimes taking a book with her, and sitting an hour or two under the trees when she found the place deserted. Once or twice she took a quiet dinner there, alone, having instructed Celestine beforehand to prepare no dinner at home. It was the last place in the city where she would have expected to meet anyone she knew. Still, she was not astonished when, as she was partaking of a modest dinner late in the afternoon, looking into an open book, stroking the cat, which had made friends with her, she was not greatly astonished to see Robert come in at the tall garden gate. "I am destined to see you only by accident," she said, shoving the cat off the chair beside her. He was surprised, ill at ease, almost embarrassed at meeting her thus so unexpectedly. "Do you come here often?" he asked. "I almost live here," she said. "I used to drop in very often for a cup of Katish's good coffee. This is the first time since I came back." "She'll bring you a plate, and you will share my dinner. There's always enough for 2, even 3. Edna had intended to be indifferent and as reserved as he when she met him. She had reached the determination by a laborious train of reasoning incident to one of her despondent moods, but her resolve melted when she saw him before designing Providence had led him into her path. "Why have you kept away from me, Robert?" she asked, closing the book that lay open upon the table. "Why are you so personal, Mrs. Pontellier? Why do you force me to idiotic subterfuges?" he exclaimed with sudden warmth. "I suppose there's no use telling you I've been very busy, or that I've been sick, or that I've been to see you and not found you at home. Please let me off with any one of these excuses." "You are the embodiment of selfishness," she said. "You save yourself something, I don't know what, but there is some selfish motive. And in sparing yourself, you never consider for a moment what I think or how I feel your neglect and indifference. I suppose this is what you would call unwomanly, but I have got into a habit of expressing myself. It doesn't matter to me, and you may think me unwomanly if you like." "No, I only think you cruel, as I said the other day. Maybe not intentionally cruel, but you seem to be forcing me into disclosures which can result in nothing, as if you would have me bear a wound for the pleasure of looking at it, without the intention or power of healing it." "I'm spoiling your dinner, Robert. Never mind what I say. You haven't eaten a morsel." "I only came in for a cup of coffee." His sensitive face was all disfigured with excitement. "Isn't this a delightful place?" she remarked. "I am so glad it has never actually been discovered. It is so quiet, so sweet here. Do you notice there is scarcely a sound to be heard? It is so out of the way and a good walk from the car. However, I don't mind walking. I always feel so sorry for women who don't like to walk. They miss so much, so many rare little glimpses of life, and we women learn so little of life, on the whole." "Katish's coffee is always hot. I don't know how she manages it here in the open air. Celestine's coffee gets cold bringing it from the kitchen to the dining room. 3 lumps. How can you drink it so sweet? Take some of the cress with your chop. It's so biting and crisp. Then there's the advantage of being able to smoke with your coffee out here. Now, in the city, aren't you going to smoke?" "After a while," he said, laying a cigar on the table. "Who gave it to you?" she laughed. "I bought it. I suppose I'm getting reckless. I bought a whole box." She was determined not to be personal again and make him uncomfortable. The cat made friends with him and climbed into his lap when he smoked his cigar. He stroked her silky fur and talked a little about her. He looked at Edna's book, which he had read, and he told her the end to save her the trouble of wading through it, he said. Again, he accompanied her back to her home, and it was after dusk when they reached the little pigeon house. She did not ask him to remain, which he was grateful for, as it permitted him to stay without the discomfort of blundering through an excuse which he had no intention of considering. He helped her to light the lamp. Then she went into her room to take off her hat and to bathe her face and hands. When she came back, Robert was not examining the pictures and magazines as before. He sat off in the shadow, leaning his head back on the chair, as if in a reverie. Edna lingered a moment beside the table, arranging the books there. Then she went across the room to where he sat. She bent over the arm of his chair and called his name. "Robert," she said, "are you asleep?" "No," he answered, looking up at her. She leaned over and kissed him. A soft, cool, delicate kiss, whose voluptuous sting penetrated his whole being. Then she moved away from him. He followed and took her in his arms, just holding her close to him. She put her hand up to his face and pressed his cheek against her own. The action was full of love and tenderness. He sought her lips again. Then he drew her down upon the sofa beside him and held her hand in both of his. "Now you know," he said. "Now you know what I have been fighting against since last summer at Grand Isle. What drove me away and drove me back again." "Why have you been fighting against it?" she asked. Her face glowed with soft lights. "Why? Because you were not free. You were Léonce Pontellier's wife. I couldn't help loving you if you were 10 times his wife, but so long as I went away from you and kept away, I could help telling you so." She put her free hand up to his shoulder and then against his cheek, rubbing it softly. He kissed her again. His face was warm and flushed. "There in Mexico, I was thinking of you all the time and longing for you, but not writing to me," she interrupted. "Something put into my head that you cared for me, and I lost my senses. I forgot everything but a wild dream of your some way becoming my wife." "Your wife?" "Religion, loyalty, everything would give way if only you cared." "Then you must have forgotten that I was Léonce Pontellier's wife." "Oh, I was demented, dreaming of wild, impossible things, recalling men who had set their wives free. We have heard of such things." "Yes, we have heard of such things." "I came back full of vague, mad intentions, and when I got here—" "When you got here, you never came near me." She was still caressing his cheek. "I realized what a cur I was to dream of such a thing, even if you had been willing." She took his face between her hands and looked into it as if she would never withdraw her eyes more. She kissed him on the forehead, the eyes, the cheeks, and the lips. "You have been a very Very foolish boy, wasting your time dreaming of impossible things when you speak of Mr. Pontellier setting me free. I am no longer one of Mr. Pontellier's possessions to dispose of or not. I give myself where I choose. If he were to say, "Here, Robert, take her and be happy, she is yours," I should laugh at you both. His face grew a little white. "What do you mean?" he asked. There was a knock at the door. Old Celestine came in to say that Madame Ratignolle's servant had come around the back way with the message that Madame had been taken sick and begged Mrs. Pontellier to go to her immediately. Yes, said Edna, rising. "I promised. Tell her yes, to wait for me. I'll go back with her." "Let me walk over with you," offered Robert. "No," she said. "I will go with the servant." She went into her room to put on her hat, and when she came in again, she sat once more upon the sofa beside him. He had not stirred. She put her arms about his neck. "Goodbye, my sweet Robert. Tell me goodbye." He kissed her with a degree of passion which had not before entered into his caress, and strained her to him. "I love you," she whispered. "Only you. No one but you. It was you who awoke me last summer out of a lifelong stupid dream. Oh, you have made me so unhappy with your indifference. Oh, I have suffered. Now you are here. We shall love each other, my Robert. We shall be everything to each other. Nothing else in the world is of any consequence. I must go to my friend, but you will wait for me. No matter how late, you will wait for me, Robert. Don't go. Don't go. Oh, Edna, stay with me, he pleaded. Why should you go? Stay with me. Stay with me. I shall come back as soon as I can. I shall find you here. She buried her face in his neck and said goodbye again. Her seductive voice, together with his great love for her, had enthralled his senses, had deprived him of every impulse but the longing to hold her and keep her. Thank you for joining me. I hope this helps, and I look forward to seeing you very much for the final reading, the final few chapters, tomorrow at the same time and the same place. Until then, please be very well.